you're back, which means the last episode didn't put you to sleep. And I'm glad, because this episode is about to get wild. Well, as wild as a podcast about illegal tax map verification fees could possibly get. I'm Rebecca Toscano, the podcast manager at Reclaim New York Initiative, and you're listening to the Spotlight Podumentary series. This is where we share stories about average New Yorkers that, despite a lot of political and economic obstacles, are trying to make New York a better place to live. In this episode, we are continuing our series on illegal fees in Suffolk County. If you're like me, and you actually like to be down in the weeds of these kinds of complicated stories, the stories that affect average Americans in unexpected ways, then you've come back to the right place. Because we're going to be exploring the weeds like crazy in this episode. In our last episode, if you'll remember, we learned all about tax map and mortgage recording fees. We learned what makes them illegal, and how this problem first surfaced in Suffolk County. For this episode, we're going to focus more on the legislative side of things. Why and how have legislators let these illegal fees slip by as if they would go unnoticed? And why have Suffolk citizens responded against them so strongly? I don't know about you, but I am often so uninformed and very disconnected from understanding how my local government is spending money. It seems like an unimportant and therefore easy thing to ignore. But it shouldn't be, because my government is spending my money. That is, the money that comes out of my paycheck in the form of fees and taxes. So I should care about it. Through uncovering this story about illegal fees, however, I've learned just how complicated and difficult it is to parse through how local governments spend their money, and thus why most citizens, like myself, are kind of resigned to being uninformed. Well, a decent number of citizens in Suffolk County actually paid attention in the past few years to what their local government was spending money on, and many were not happy with what they saw. So, as you'll hear, they decided to do something about it. Even if you don't live in Suffolk County, or anywhere in New York for that matter, there's still a lot to learn from this story about how your local government might be both making and spending your hard-earned cash.
Every working individual's desire is to be rewarded. And in this case, we're talking about monetary reward.
Mm-hmm.
So many people feel sour about losing money that they worked so hard for, to essentially legal fees.
Hello, my name is Hector Gavia. I'm in support of IRC 1107, which is to limit the county fee increases.
Suffolk has surmounted over $2 billion in debt and close to a $200 million structural deficit. And these backdoor fees are your answer?
We went to visit Central Records, all AME members, county workers. Okay, so I thought it would be important to let you know that in our tour, we had, in that section, there's one employee who is currently doing the job of 6 people. So I thought it would be important to give you that information that we have reduced our staff.
I'm sorry, you're incorrect. No, that the county cannot do that. The other part was, did you know that I have not voted for any of these fee increases except for those that have committed a crime, and that's for the probation fee increase.
When I was first learning about this story, I was really curious to know how much legislators knew about the legality of their fee increases. After all, the job of a legislator is complicated and nuanced, and the law which bars fees from bringing in more revenue than operating costs is not exactly a well-known New York law, for obvious reasons. Maybe they didn't know they weren't allowed to raise the fees exponentially. After I combed through hours and hours of legislative meeting minutes, I discovered that the legality of the fees did in fact go largely unmentioned as part of the debate. Well, that is until December 20th, 2016, the same day the 2017 budget needed to be approved. The budget which was to yield quite a lot of revenue from these fees. Legislator Robert Trotta, who spoke out against the fees early and often, was the first to question the fees' legality at a public hearing.
The bottom line is, I have a question to the council here. Are we in trouble that at some point, if someone brings a lawsuit against us because this fee is not going to that, to the structural, the personnel, and what it occurs, because I've read about this, and it's very troubling to me that if someone brings a lawsuit to us, this could cost us millions of dollars. Very similar to the lawsuit against the red light cameras for the $30 administration fee. I'm very concerned about that. So this is something that probably won't happen for 4 or 5 years, and a lot of things that go on, decisions are made here, people won't be sitting here then. So I would like, your opinion on the probability that this may happen.
Are you asking me the probability of somebody suing us over this fee?
Yeah, because, it's fairly clear. I've talked to prior counsel to the legislature and other lawyers, and they've said, yeah, it most certainly happened. There's case law that says it. Mitch Paley, who signed a letter against this, and Kevin Law said this is a big problem. We got to be careful about this.
Well, I think what you're saying is there is a general principle that not that this particular fee would go to the clerk and to fund their operations, but the fees are, as a general proposition, are supposed to be commensurate with the cost of providing the service. And I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that. If it's, we added $200 last year, $300 this year, how can you justify that that's commensurate with the service? I mean, and what happens to us a year from now when the lawsuit comes in and we sit here in an executive session, we owe, $50 million? That's irresponsible. And we owe it to the taxpayers to make sure this isn't going to happen. And, based upon your response and the response of lawyers I spoke to, we shouldn't even be discussing this. This is terrible. This is horrible government.
And yet, at 8:32 p.m. on December 20th, 2016, the following vote was recorded by the legislature.
Okay, motion to approve. Roll call.
Legislator Calarco, Legislator Gregory, Spencer, DeMauro, Stern, McCaffrey, Trotta, Kennedy, Farraga, Silmy, Martinez, Lindsay, Anchor, Hahn, Muratori, Browning, Fleming, Krupski. 10.
Okay, all right. The fun is over. All right.
So, the fee passed with 10 votes. Why would the Suffolk County Legislature vote positively for something they knew was illegal? Well, it turns out they were under a lot of pressure from different angles, and some thought that the benefit of the increased revenue would help Suffolk County enough to justify the breaking of the law. I'll let you hear a few of the reasons they listed in response to Legislator Trotta. These testimonies are by legislators Barraga, Spencer, Presiding Officer Gregory, legislators DeMauro and Calarco, respectively.
I certainly understand my colleague's concern, and I can easily understand for someone who voted against the 2017 budget to vote against this. It's logical. I voted against the 2017 budget because I didn't think it was aggressive enough, assertive enough in dealing with the deficit. That was my reason. So I could logically vote against this bill, but I choose not to do so because the 2017 budget is in play. If we vote against this, if it doesn't pass us, you've got a $33 million hole in your budget. And that hole will encompass programs that we put in place to be of help and assistance to the people of Suffolk County. It will increase, if we don't pass this, the 3-year deficit. The structural deficit will also be increased dramatically. It puts us further in the hole. And there's no money's coming someplace else to offset this. It's a $33 million hole.
But when I'm here very seriously looking at the future of Long Island and looking at an opportunity to make those difficult decisions, then I see this as something that I have to support in the process of closing that budget gap. And I think it's not a short-term process. It's a long-term process. We've eliminated our 10% of our workforce. We've gotten out from under state mandates. The sales tax isn't as reliable, but it's not like we're sitting up here like a bunch of drunken sailors. I run a tight business. I run a business. There are 20 people that every 2 weeks rely on me for a paycheck. And I try to run government like I run my business, but we have too many obligations and responsibilities. And sometimes we do have to make these choices. We do have to bond things. We do have to spend money because people are relying on us.
I heard the argument that our young people, we had students from Stony Brook that are here. They're saying, well, I want to buy a home, and, this increase is going to move me off a Long Island. I don't buy that. I don't think a kid at 19 years old is going to buy a home. God bless them if they can. And I don't think anyone is going to move to Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, Arizona, or anywhere else because of $300. I think it's going to cost more to relocate than the increase in this fee. But these types of fees, but we also have to be cognizant and responsible to the budget that we passed. Can't go into knowing that we're going to potentially put a $33 million hole in our budget. That is not responsible, because it's more than those kids that we hear earlier. There are going to be many people that will be hurt by that cut. Potentially hundreds, if not a couple thousand of employees could lose their jobs, and whoever else could be impacted by it with the services that are provided.
And by the way, the reason that it's so expensive is because maybe all of the other parts of this industry should roll their fees back $300 or $600 or $900 and give homeowners a real break, because that's where the high closing costs are coming from. The county of Suffolk charges you to record your deed, they charge you to record your mortgage, and they're increasing this one fee. That's it. It's maybe going to cost you $600 to $800, if that, when you purchase a home. But the public needs to understand that we are in a very difficult position here, because we have to continue to deliver these government services, we have to fund them, and we have to do it in an economy that we didn't create, that we didn't melt down, that was caused by many other factors that are completely beyond our control. And yet, even though that economy melts down and our revenue goes down based on our sales tax, we have to continue to deliver essential services to the residents of Suffolk County. So I hope that the residents will appreciate that the approach that we're taking here this evening is really goes towards protecting them more than doing any harm or driving them off the island. I suggest that there are many factors.
And I haven't heard of any of the better ideas of dealing with this $33 million. I would have been happy to have taken it out of the budget. But nobody offered a $30 million fix to fill it, including cuts. Yeah, you did. A control board. So let's go there. So over the last 5 years since I've been in office, we reduced our county payroll by 1,200 employees. 1,200 employees. We have merged departments. We have privatized our health centers. The first one next year is coming completely offline. The quorum will no longer receive a subsidy from the county to operate.
What I learned from this and other interviews and research is that there are two main reasons this fee passed, despite its illegal nature. First, legislators thought it would go largely unnoticed since it's only affecting people that are recording a mortgage, something citizens supposedly might not do very often in their lifetime, though not according to Joseph Latini's testimony that we heard in episode 1. The second reason is that they had a huge budget shortfall, more than $30 million that they needed to make up, and they didn't have many immediate options for covering it. But what led them to such a huge budget gap in the first place? And why didn't they have any other options for filling that hole? I spoke to a few legislators and experts who have opinions about why, and I came up with 4 main reasons that I think will help us understand. Reason number 1, tax increase caps. There was quite a bit of argument among legislators about whether or not this fee counted as a tax increase.
So I'm not going to sit here and be told that by passing a fee increase that someone's going to pay twice in a lifetime is a recurring tax increase of 60%. That is false information. That is false news, and you should not ever repeat that.
It's not false information.
And I have to tell you, it's inappropriate. Listen, it's inappropriate. You can talk all you want. But the people of this county need to know the fact of the matter is it's not a tax increase. It is falsely being labeled as such. It is not a 60% increase in property taxes. In fact, for my entire tenure in this legislature, the general fund property tax has never increased. Not one time.
And that's the
So for you to sit here now and tell me after being here for 11 years that this is a 60% tax increase is just patently false. And it's that type of false information that's misleading county taxpayers, and that's why you have angry people coming up to this podium and blaming this legislature for not doing our job, when the fact is over the last 11 years, we have been doing our job, and we have been protecting county taxpayers.
Really? Because we took $153 million out of the sewer stabilization fund in the past 3 years. We borrowed $300 million from the pension fund. Is that doing your job?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
not doing your job.
It absolutely is.
It's not doing
It
your job.
absolutely is. I'm protecting taxpayers.
It is a $32 million equivalent to a 60% increase.
You can make up all the numbers you want and label it any way you want.
All right.
Dr. Lip, the fact of the matter is, when you talk about this...
The reason they are arguing so fiercely about this is that, as you know, the fee was planned to bring in revenue that was not designated to the Real Property Tax Service Agency like it was supposed to be. That extra $30+ million was slated for their general revenue fund. And for the most part, only money collected from taxes is supposed to be contributed to that fund. So this fee functions as what we might call a hidden tax. It's not titled a tax, and it's not paid by every Suffolk County resident in the form of a tax, but it generates money in the same way that a tax increase would. So, if they needed to generate this extra money, why didn't they just do it legally by raising taxes? Well, I think you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a legislator that would get elected by running on a platform that they had plans to increase taxes. No one wants to vote for that. But even if they tried, New York State has various laws about how much municipalities are allowed to increase taxes each year. And the percentages are pretty low. So it's likely that even if they did increase taxes by the amount they were allowed, it wouldn't generate enough revenue to cover their budget gap. Reason number 2, mandated programs. For this one, I spoke with legislator Tom Selmy, and I'll let him fill you in.
New York is one of 2 or 3 states in the country that passes on a substantial amount of Medicaid expense to its counties. So in most of the country, the states pay 50% of the total cost of Medicaid. The federal government pays the other 50%. In New York State, the state pays 50%, but then, or the state pays 25%. The federal government pays 50%. The state pays 25% and then makes the counties pay the other 25%. So to Suffolk County taxpayers, that amounts to close to $250 million. It may even be in excess of $250 million annually in Medicaid expense. That 95% of the rest of the country, in terms of the counties, doesn't have to pay for. In addition to that, the public assistance programs that are mandated by New York State are substantially more generous than the public assistance programs that are required by the federal government. The federal government requires a certain level of public assistance in order to get Medicaid dollars. New York State has chosen to offer substantially greater benefits to, or assistance, I should say, to its residents in perpetuity. So where the federal government, I believe, caps required public assistance at like 5 years, in New York State, you can receive public assistance in perpetuity. Wow. And so many people come to New York State, explicitly for the public assistance benefits. And what that does is then it obviously it taxes in the lowercase sense of the word. It taxes our financial situation in the government, which then in turn requires greater taxation on our residents. Now, it's true that a large portion of the problem has to do with unfunded mandates that come down to us from New York State.
Right, yeah.
But, if we continue to pretend that our budget is balanced each year, The New York State has no incentive to reduce those mandates on our taxpayers.
Reason number 3. Revenue has not increased along with expenses. As you heard, some legislators argued essentially that a recessive economy caused the county to experience a stagnant revenue stream over the past few years, causing their expenses to outpace their revenue. Legislator Silmy had a slightly different opinion on the matter.
The county should have come to the conclusion more than a decade ago that expenses were beginning to outpace revenue, and we should have done more at that point to control our expenses. Instead, what we've done is borrowed money and incurred all this debt. And as a result of that, our annual operating budget is impacted in a substantial way by the debt service associated with all of these years of accumulated debt in terms of serial bond debt, which is for the debt that we incur for capital projects, but also in terms of pension debt. The county, as we sit here today, is in close to, if not in excess of, $300 million of pension debt alone. So every year, not only do we have to pay for that year's pension obligations, but we have to pay for the debt associated with prior year's obligations as well.
Finally, reason number 4, and probably the most highly debated reason I've discovered, overspending. Here's Michael Watt, a regional director at Reclaim, with his opinion on the matter.
The budget's why is the budget a mess? Because their priorities are out of whack. They try to do too much. There was a famous case last year where a legislator wanted to spend $300,000 to buy a rock that's been there for 3 billion years. It's not going anywhere. There's absolutely no reason why the county should own a rock. The money's not real to them. The money is just lines on a piece of paper. And when your priority is to get your name in the paper for some kind of feel-good legislation without looking at the real cost of that, your spending tends to get out of control. So you have 18 legislators, you have a county executive. They're all well-intentioned. I will give them credit for that. But as former county executive Steve Levy once said, just because something's a good idea doesn't mean we have to do it, especially if we can't afford it. And that's the problem. People who run businesses know that you have to account for every nickel that you spend, and you have to think about every expenditure. You have to think it through, because if you run out of cash, you're out of business. And unfortunately, in the government, you run out of cash, you just raise fees and you raise taxes.
Legislator Silmy agreed that overspending was a problem in Suffolk County, as did Legislator Trotta when I spoke with him. Here's Legislator Trotta.
Look, Suffolk County is one of the richest counties in the country, yet we're flat busted broke. We don't have a tax problem. We have a spending problem. We spend too much. The special interests are getting boatloads of money, whether it be in pay raises or tax cuts, and the big IDA now is we need to keep business on Long Island, so we're going to cut their taxes. Well, guess what? Guess who picks up that money? The residents who are paying taxes on their houses.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of control. It's totally 100% mismanaged. If this was a company, we'd be out of business.
But what is all this overspending going towards? Legislator Trotta has one opinion that is highly unpopular with the rest of the legislature.
The county executive, Ballone, got into office in 2012, and he was faced with, that year, somewhere about a $300 million budget shortfall and $1.6 billion in outstanding debt.
Mm-hmm.
And what did he do? He gave the police officers a 28% pay increase at a cost of $400 million.
Wow.
An 8-year contract at 3 times the cost of living every year for 8 years. Who would ever do that? You know who would do that? Someone who took huge sums of campaign money from the police unions. The system's corrupt, plain and simple.
Wow, what a budget storm Suffolk County legislators have found themselves in. And I'm sure there are reasons which I did not uncover during my research, as local budgets can be complicated and steeped in decades-old organizational habits. As you heard, legislators in support of the fee increases had many opinions themselves. What about all those budget cuts that already took place? Where's the skeleton staff and the reduced expenses? I wanted to know about those. Well, I tried very hard to speak with legislators who spoke out in support of these fees with those opinions. If their hands really were tied, I wanted to know more about it. What are the services so essential that would need to be cut? Why was there a huge increase in police salaries if there was such a structural deficit budget problem? Why wasn't the tax revenue increasing each year to cover expenses? And what other expenses had already been cut? But unfortunately, those I reached out to declined to comment, and I didn't find any obvious answers when trying to decipher the county budget myself. Those declined to speak with me include legislators DeMero, Spencer, Calarco, Presiding Officer Gregory, and I was unable to speak with former legislator Barraga because he's no longer in office. What have we learned during this episode? Well, we learned that legislators knew they were voting for something illegal, why they felt the pressure to do so, and why and how the deficit of the Suffolk County budget sits at the root of this problem. Even if we assume that legislators were in a really tough financial spot through no fault of their own, Suffolk County residents and some legislators don't think that generating more revenue through illegally increased fees is really the best way to fix all of Suffolk's budget problems. To them, it's like trying to fix a broken leg with a few band-aids. In episode 3, we'll hear from more Suffolk County residents about why this fee is just the tip of an iceberg for them and what they've done in response. If you suspect fees are too high in your municipality or that your local government might be spending your money irresponsibly, you'll be intrigued by the response of Suffolk County citizens.
Hello?
Hi, Julie. It's Rebecca. How are you?
Oh, hi, Rebecca. I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for joining me.
That's what's happening here. No one wants to talk about it. Everyone puts their heads down. But the reality is, people in this horseshoe voted for that contract, probably because the county executive made up some excuse when he was in cahoots with the prior chief. And if you'll hear about this.
So that $4,500 becomes technically a second mortgage on the property that is forgivable after a certain amount of time. Well, that forgivable mortgage has to be recorded. So for the honor of New York State giving them $4,500, the county charged them $550 to record it.
When I went to Chase Bank to close out the file and was told I needed to pay a lien release filing fee of $550.50, I had tears in my eyes and many sleepless nights wondering, how am I going to pay? I am now 75 years old, living on Social Security and a pension of less than $200 a month.
Thanks for listening to the Spotlight Podumentary series. Please take a moment to rate the show and or leave a review on iTunes. If you email me and let me know you've left a review, we will send you a free Fight the Fees lawn sign. My email address is Rebecca, that's Rebecca with 2 C's, at reclaimnynow.org. Also, I'd love for you to join this conversation. So feel free to email me questions or comments about anything you've heard about this topic. You could also find us on Facebook or tweet at reclaimnynow with the hashtag FightTheFees. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope to hear from you. If you didn't know, Reclaim New York Initiative is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, registered 501c4 organization that works to empower all New Yorkers with information and tools to make sure government officials understand that they work for the people. You can find out more about Reclaim New York Initiative and these illegal fees by visiting www.reclaimnynow.org.